very happy today to be joined by Steve Snyder. Steve's wearing his floral shirt because he's joining us from his location in Maui, where he's lived for how many years now, Steve?
Oh, since 2005, so 19, I guess, just
Oh,
about.
very nice. And you've got what, 70 acres? Did you say 60
Yeah.
acres?
70 acres over on the North Shore near Hana, and we just bought a home a couple of years ago in the Wailea Golf Estates on the South Shore.
Oh, very nice. Yeah. So I've had many nice vacations to Maui, so I can picture it well. So
I
I'm
took
very
my wife
jealous.
for a honeymoon, and she said I never want to leave, so we,
I
we,
understand that completely. So
we're here.
great. Hey, thanks for joining us today. I really wanted to take some time to, well, first, let me tell our audience a little bit about you. Steve Snyder, I was first introduced to Steve about a year and a half ago, and I've seen his presentation three times now. The presentation that I saw is one that he gives called Mind Matters, Brilliance, Passion, and the Nature of Mastery. And what I took away from that, the reason I wanted to talk to you today, Steve, is I took away things from that presentation that I still use to this day. We'll cover, my family knows about it. My kids talk to me about it sometimes. It really had a lasting impact on me. And I really wanted to share that with the audience today. However, rather than introducing you with the formal introduction, I'd sort of like to talk a little bit about my impression of you. My impression is that Steve is a man who has dedicated his life to getting the most possible out of his brain and out of his memory. He's dedicated, he started reading what, at the age of 2, I believe it was. He's read over 100,000 books. He has a program called Alpha Learning, which helps with memory and speed reading. We'll get into that a little bit later. But his dedication his entire life has been utilizing his brain and his memory to the max. Is that a fair summary, Steve?
I might substitute the word mind for brain, but yeah, pretty much accurate. I got fascinated with the nature of the human mind and brain when I was a little kid and started reading everything I could find about it. And it's just fascinates me. It just always has, and I think always will. The capacity of the human mind to learn and to grow and to solve problems and make decisions is truly miraculous.
Nice. So, tell me, if I were to substitute the word mind, um, rather than what you can do with your mind and your memory, I think the real focus I'd like to be on today is how you can help us in that short half hour we have. What's the most important lessons you could give us about how to best use and preserve our minds and memories? Where would we start?
Well, I think we start with the nature of focus. The mind is capable of doing a lot of things, but it's also capable of doing a lot of things at the same time, being aware of a whole bunch of things at the same time. That was a survival mechanism. I mean, for most of human history, we were in danger a lot, and we had to be aware of any possible danger coming from any possible direction. So our brain sort of grew into its ability to be in a high stress, pay attention, be in a survival mode.
Right.
Well, the truth is, we're pretty much safe in today's world. Prior to COVID, you could go weeks or maybe even months without any real danger. Once in a while, the guy in front of you slams on his brakes, but
Yeah.
mostly the world's safe. So greatness, peak performance, mastery comes from focusing all of your attention on only one thing. If you can put all of your brain, all of your mind on only one thing, you can do the very best you can do. So learning how to do that is the key. And people are hoping that the thing they're about to do is so interesting, so fascinating that it gets their total attention. It often doesn't. There's so many distractions that their minds don't give 100% attention. So the secret, I believe, is, and the most important thing I teach, I believe, is how to focus your mind on one thing so that you can take that focused mind and bring it to whatever you want to pay attention to. Instead of hoping that that thing you're about to do will get your attention, you get your own attention and bring it to whatever it is you wish to pay attention to.
Great. And how do we do that?
Well, you pick one thing to pay attention to and
Mhm.
get really, really good at paying attention to that. And asking your conscious, logical mind to pick that thing is only devoting 12%, the conscious portion of your mind, to the problem. What you want to do is devote 100% of your mind, the subconscious, the other 88% to the problem as well. So what I have people do is close their eyes and take a deep breath. That lets the brain know you're safe. If you can take a deep breath, you're not in danger. If you're in
Okay.
danger, you tighten your muscles and hold your breath. Excuse me. So if you can take a deep breath, you're feeling safe. And then trust your intuition to know the thing to pay attention to. So I ask people to close their eyes and take a deep breath and imagine themselves in a safe and peaceful place. And whatever pops up for people in their mind, whatever the intuition brings to them, that's a place that their mind enjoys paying attention to, enjoys being there. So for some people, it's a memory. For others, it's a pretend fantasy of a place they'd love to be. For some people, it's just the color purple. For other people, it's a grandma's farm. Whatever comes up that makes them feel at ease, that makes them feel safe, they close their eyes, take a deep breath, and go to that place for 10, 20, 30 seconds. That's all, but do that over and over and over and over and over again, so that when it comes time to want to pay attention to something else, you go to that first. And then with your mind in that attention mode, that focused passion mode, you bring that focused passion to whatever it is you wish to pay attention to, whether it's a peak performance or reading a book or listening to music or talking to your spouse or whatever it is where you want to give your full attention. You get your own full attention and then bring it to that thing.
Okay. I'm curious, sort of going off on a tangent here, but I'm curious, in the last 5 years or so, we've seen a lot of people become addicted to social media and the continual distraction of social media. I assume you've seen the same thing. Does this play into that, or what's the interaction between that and this? This would seem to be the opposite of that, but does this help combat that?
Oh, it's just the opposite. It's the big danger. We are constantly distracted by social media, and I think in mostly a negative way. Now, there is positive applications of social media, no question. And I have no problem with spending 5 or 10 minutes on Facebook here and there.
Yeah.
But if it's constantly on your mind, if you're always looking at your phone, if you're always, then your mind is in a constant distraction state. And that takes away from the ability to really, truly pay attention. So I think it's become a really big problem, especially with the youth. It's become a huge problem in today's world, that's constant distraction. And because the mind is much more geared to focusing on the negative than the positive, because negative stuff is about survival, positive stuff's only about growth. So it pales in insignificance compared to the negative stuff. We're always distracted by the negative stuff. And therefore, our mind is in this survival mode again, most of the time, like it used to be a million years ago. We want to get out of that need for survival because we're not really in danger. The subconscious can't tell the difference between real and imaginary. So when you imagine you're in danger, like worry is imagining you're in danger, then your mind acts as if you're actually in danger. So the more we go to the distraction of the negative stuff on the social media, the jealousy, the envy, the wishing I was there, all that kind of stuff, that negative stuff, it takes us away from being here now, which is where the joy and the happiness of life really exists.
Right. Okay, so what you're suggesting is that when we want to focus on a task, take that, I think you said 20, 30 seconds to focus on, you called it a safe and peaceful place. I've taken to call it my happy place.
That works.
And is that helps? That's a muscle, I assume, we need to build up?
In essence, I mean, not technically, but in essence, it's an ability, skill. The ability to totally focus your mind on one thing has always been inherent in the human mind. It's always been something the mind can do. It just can't do it when we don't feel safe. It can only do that if we don't feel safe. We have to be in a beta brain, divided attention state. But if we can feel safe, then we can bring our attention to only one thing, which is the key to mastery.
Okay. So let me give you a hypothetical. I'm working on something that's going to take 15 minutes. So I set up my workspace, no distractions. I go to my happy place for 20, 30 seconds. I get that thing done, great focus. Do I do it again before I work on something else, or do I just keep going until I find myself distracted?
You take your mind totally off of that task you just accomplished, might add a little bit of gratitude, a little bit of self-appreciation, a little bit of patting yourself on the back for having done such a great job. And then once again, after a short break, you go back to your peaceful place to get your focus again, and then bring it to the next task.
So when did you learn this, Steve? And how would you say it's affected your life?
Oh, dramatically. I learned this as a very young boy. I learned to read when I was 2, and I just was great at it. And by the time I was 6 going into school, I'd read 1,400 books. And I got fascinated with why my mind was so different than the other kids in my classroom's mind. I was the only kid that knew how to read. And so my mind was like I thought, different than other people's minds.
Mhm.
Most people think most people's minds are the same as theirs, but they're
Mhm.
not. And so I thought, well, that's very interesting. Let me read about that because I loved reading. So I
Right.
started reading about it, and I came to study self-hypnosis. That was the first introduction for me, and then meditation, and then altered states of consciousness, and I studied brainwave activity, and I just started learning about how the brain and the mind work. And in doing that, I got really, really interested in this alpha brainwave state. That's the focused passion state. That's the totally paying attention to one thing state. I'm fascinated with sleep and dreams as well. That's the delta and theta state. But I became most fascinated with the meditative state, the self-hypnotic state. It's like a daydream-like state. You're awake, but you're not stressed. It's like
Yeah.
really relaxed and safe and focused. And I started practicing that. I started meditating when I was 8 years old. I started doing self-hypnosis when I was 8 years old. And I'm 71, and that's actually I'm 72 as of 3 days ago.
Happy birthday.
I have to switch over. It's 2024 now. So I started practicing with that and learning more and more about it. And I think that my whole life has been based around that. I invented a speed reading technique when I was 12 years old by combining my two hobbies, this alpha state and reading, and I put them two together and figured out a way to teach people how to read the way they think instead of the way they talk, in this safe mode, not distracted by the outside world, just totally involved in that book or whatever it is they're doing. And I started teaching that when I was 15 years old for money. And I've never had a job. I've been doing that for ever since.
Nice. So tell us a little bit about the speed reading, if you could. Can I start with a story here? I had a friend years ago, and she was a big proponent of speed reading. And I'm going to put you on the spot here, Steve, because she'd say, "Oh yeah, I read 11 books last week," or I forget what the number was, but a large number of books last week. He'd say, "Oh, you read that book? Yeah, what was it about?" And she'd say, "I don't remember." That's um, it. So how do we make speed reading work and retain?
Well, to me, what she did was not reading. It was probably skimming. It
Mhm.
was probably just getting the gist, getting the essence of it. I'm more like the golfer that remembers every single stroke when they play golf.
Right?
They go home and talk about, oh yeah, on that fourth hole, the third shot I did. Because I'm so immersed in the book. In fact, I taught my wife when I was first getting involved in our relationship that if I'm reading, I'm not going to hear you.
Okay.
You got to tap me on the shoulder. That's what you got to do. You got to tap me on the shoulder to let me know that you want my attention. And then I'll put the book down. I know I can pick it up right where I left off. I'm going to put the book down and I'm going to give you my full attention. But
Mhm.
I'm reading, I'm immersed. So what happened for me was, first of all, I didn't learn to read the way most people do. I didn't learn the alphabet. I
Mhm.
sat on my mom's lap when I was 2 years old and I pointed at words. I said,
Right.
what's that word? What's that word? What's that? And so I learned that those funny looking squiggles mean dog and those funny looking squiggles mean run. And I just memorized all what those words were.
Mhm.
And then I was reading for a while, years, and it occurred to me that I'm reading one word at a time, but authors don't write one word at a time. They write ideas and they have to put
Yeah.
it down on the page as one word at a time. So if I could read the idea instead of just the word, it'd be much faster. If my eyes moved at the same speed they're moving now, but I could read 3 or 4 words each time I looked, then I'd be reading 3 or 4 or 5 times faster than I read now. So I thought, well, that's the key. How do I read a group of words? Like when you read in the house, your mind looks at the word in and defines it as the opposite of out, or you know what in means. And then
Yeah.
you look at the word the, and you have no idea what the means. It means proceed to next noun. And
Some
then you look at,
specific house. Yeah.
and you see a house. Generally, you'd see the exterior of a house before
Mhm.
the brain puts them together and correlates the data and gets you in the house. Well, I figured if I could read, for example, the word psychologist all in one look, I should be able to read the phrase in the house in one look, the same size.
Okay.
I needed to train my eyes to read that much, 3 or 4 words each time. Now, I knew I could just purposely do that. I
Mhm.
could purposely tell myself to look at 3 or 4 words at a time, but then I'd have the problem of being in a divided attention state. Part of my mind thinking about the process of how I'm reading, and part of my thinking about the content of what I'm reading. And
Okay.
if I'm doing two things at the same time, I'm not in that alpha state. I'm not
Right.
in that expression state. So what I came up with, this, I have to self-proclaim, this was a genius idea. I was 12 years old. I came up with this idea of creating in my mind, in my imagination, an imaginary book. And in my mind, I created this imaginary book that when I opened the book and looked at the page, there were no words. Instead, there were 3 lines, like slot machine bars, left, center, and right. 3 lines across every line that would have been words. And I just, with my eyes closed, I pretended to read that book. I physically moved my eyes, left, center, right, left, center, right, left, center, right. And as I was basking in the afterglow of feeling great love for this book, because to change your mind, you have to do X number of repetitions at Y emotional amplitude. The more passion you have, the fewer repetitions you need. So I created an imaginary book that I loved. I mean, my book was solid gold and jewel encrusted. And every time I picked it up, every hungry person in the world got fed. It's like, I love the book. And so every time I picked up this book and I got that, I love this book feeling, I'd open it up and I'd move my eyes left, center, right, left, center, right, left, center, right, close the book. And I'd just do that dozens of times a day.
Okay.
When I read a real book, I just read the way I always did. I never did anything intentionally because I wanted to pay attention to the words, to what I was reading. So when I was reading for real, I only read what I paid attention to the comprehension of what I was reading. But after doing that exercise enough, one day I was reading along in a regular book, my regular way, da, 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 da. Yeah. And my mind went, wait a minute, I know this other way that I love. And it went click. And my mind went, left, center, right, left. Whoa, I'm doing it. I wasn't trying to do it or efforting it. It just happened because I practiced it so much. And I was just doing it. And just like when you're really, really little, you'd crawl across the room, but you practice a bit and you fall a whole bunch. But one day it goes click and you started to walk. Well, that's what it was. It just went click. And I started to do the trifocus. And it never went back. I mean, it was so much better, so much more easy. My comprehension was so much greater because my mind wasn't wandering. Most people's mind wanders because they read so slow. All of a sudden, I'm reading 3 times faster. My eyes moving the same speed, but I'm seeing 3 words each time. And all of a sudden, there's enough information to really keep my mind occupied. And it was amazing. It was wonderful. And I practiced this and I taught my friends how to do it. And then at 15, I said, I really should charge money for this. And I went into business teaching.
Getting it free today, so.
Yeah. Right.
So I'm sorry, I interrupted, but would that be, so it sounds like it would be a fair summary to say that you trained your brain, you trained your mind, trained your mind and your eyes to move in this sequence, and then you trusted that your mind would keep up.
Yes, exactly. But the mind was incentivized by the fact that it felt like I was reading this imaginary book that was so wonderful that I loved this book.
Okay. Now, do you read differently if you're reading, say, a novel for pleasure, as opposed you would, say, to a business book or textbook?
I do. First of all, if I'm reading for pleasure, the speed that I go at doesn't really matter that much. It's just whatever feels natural, whatever feels easy. Right. It's still really fast compared to most people, but I'm not in any rush or any hurry. It's like a leisurely walk kind of thing for me. It's still a couple thousand words a minute, but it's easy. But when I'm reading for knowledge or like study reading kind of thing, a business book, generally speaking, I will know most of that already. It would be in my field probably. So a lot of it would be kind of boilerplate for me. Yeah. So I read really, really, really fast with business books and study books, really, really, really fast, pushing myself until I get to something I don't know or really, really, really want to know. And then I stop and I slow down and I read that maybe 2 or 3 times to make sure I got it, to make sure I put it in my memory bank with this emotional writer that says, that's mine. I own that information, that quote, that statistic, that detail. I really paid attention to that twice, to make sure I got it. And then so basically read pleasure reading is at a steady, comfortable speed, study reading very fast, except for the stuff that I really don't know or need to know. And I slow down and take that in with extra emphasis.
Steve, I'm going to try that. Technique makes a lot of sense. And I think we've both been exposed. I apologize to my friends who are authors, but I've both been exposed to business books that are 150 pages of book and 20 pages of content.
You got to fill in the space.
You can't sell a 20-page book.
there are people reading those business books, and it's the first business book they've read,
Yeah.
and they don't know that 120 pages worth of stuff that you already know.
Yeah.
So the author has to put that in there. But for those of us who've read lots of business books, and especially say lots of business books by the same author, there's a lot of redundancy. There just has to be. So we don't need to study that. Great students only study what they don't know. They don't study what they already know. You don't have to study what you already know. You just have to take it in and make sure you already, you know it.
Yeah. It blew my kids' minds when I told them if you really know the subject, you don't have to do the homework. Well, the teacher says I have. No, you don't. Why study? Why do exercises that you already know? You've got the multiplication tables, for example, down cold? Why do them again?
I totally agree. So much of the homework is a waste of time, and it's got to be there for those who need it.
Sure.
There are people who don't get it while they're in the class and they need it, but for those that it really turns off people who already know the stuff.
So let's turn to memory. I'm advertising this this presentation, this conversation. One of the things I'm talking about is never lose your keys again. Let's turn to memory and talk about how we get things. Why or do we forget things, and how do we keep from forgetting?
Well, for example, the one you just mentioned, keys, or something that you're carrying around with you and you put it down somewhere. So for most people, the reason they forget where they put something is not because they have a bad memory. It's because they were paying attention to something else. Their mind was not thinking about where they put that thing down. They were thinking, like the phone's ringing, you're ready to answer the phone, and you put your keys down, and when you hang up the phone, you don't know where your keys are. Well, the reason is you were paying attention to the phone. You were in alpha brainwave state, total focus concentration on the phone. And what you did with the keys was you weren't paying attention to it, so it didn't get into your memory bank. You got to block out stuff you don't pay attention to without even thinking. You got to realize you got to do that. Otherwise, you'd remember the exact shape of every grain of sand you ever saw, So you really do need to block stuff out. You block most stuff out. So the only stuff that gets in there really is the stuff you pay attention to. So the way you remember your keys, that, for example, where you put your keys, there's two great ways of doing it. One is always put them in the same place. That's a great way to do it. I don't do that. That is a great way. What I do is rather unusual, but if I'm like running to answer the phone and I put my keys down somewhere, I'll go, keys! I'll totally pay attention to where I put them for that 1 second. And then when I get off the phone, I know exactly where they are. Whenever I put my phone down somewhere, I don't usually put it. I always go phone in my mind if there's other people around, but out loud when there's nobody else around, I go phone. And whenever I do anything that I don't usually do, I make a point of really paying attention to it, hyper attention to it, so that I make sure it goes into my memory bank. You remember what you love. You remember what you hate. You remember what scares you and what excites you. What you have trouble remembering or don't remember is what you were bored by, apathetic about, or indifferent to, or didn't pay attention to. So not only do you have to pay attention, but you have to pay attention with great emotion to make sure that you remember.
I'm glad you talked about that. I really wanted to bring that up today because, as I said at the beginning, I heard Stephen's presentation over a year ago now, and this absolutely works. My kids laugh at me. We were up in the media room shooting pool one day and watching the football game, and I had my keys in my pocket. I didn't want them in my pocket while I was shooting pool, so I set them under the TV, and I went, keys. Yeah. And then the next morning I got up. I always keep my keys in the same place in the drawer in the bedroom. And I got up and I opened the drawer and the keys weren't there. And my brain said, oh, yeah, they're up under the TV in the media room.
Wonderful.
There you go. It absolutely works. Works for your phone, works for your keys.
This is important information.
Make the emotional connection, and that's what forms the memory.
Yeah. Yeah. People, generally speaking, only pay attention to their memory when it does something wrong. They really generally take it for granted that it's going to do stuff right. And the truth is, you remember more than 1 million things for every one thing you forget. I mean, you realize when you're born, you're pretty much a blank slate. Every single thing you ever experienced, you had to learn and remember. So our memory is amazing. It's like a computer in a way. I mean, and if you typed into a computer, a question, and the computer came back and said, I don't remember, it would freak you out. It's not supposed to happen. Well, it's really not supposed to happen. There's only 3 possible ways to forget things. It's an anomaly. It's not supposed to happen. One way is we get really stressed, and the filter between the two minds, called the reticular activating system, shuts down. We're so stressed we have to block so much out. And the information comes up and it hits the filter, and this is the tip of the tongue kind of forgetting. We forget temporarily. Another kind of forgetting that's very rare, very few of us have ever experienced, which is where we have some horrible trauma. Something terrible happens and we get a mental block. We can't remember that horrible accident or that terrible time we were raped or robbed or whatever it was. That happens. But the main way people fail to remember stuff is by programming their mind to do that, by saying to themselves, I have a bad memory, or by saying to themselves, I can't remember names, or by saying to themselves, I always forget where I put stuff. By programming your mind, by saying things to yourself or thinking things to yourself about how your memory doesn't work. And that makes your memory, as a self-fulfilling prophecy, not work. So you want to pay attention to your memory when it does stuff right. Then it won't need to do stuff wrong to get your attention. It wants attention like any child does. So it'll get your attention by doing stuff wrong if you don't give it attention for doing stuff right. So every morning of my life, I wake up, and when I say my prayers, when I count my blessings, my memory is right at the top of the list. I'm so happy I have a great memory. I'm so proud of my memory, how brilliantly it works. And, I'm 72 years old, and most of my friends are losing some of their memory, and I'm not. And I think that's a lot because I've spent so much time in my life just really being so proud of how great it works.
Nice. It reminds me, before my time, but the comedian Milton Berle, if you remember him, he had a great line. He said, I've gotten to the age, the point in my life where sometimes in the middle of a sentence,
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about the reticular activating system. Is that what you called it?
Yeah.
And is that the barrier between I'm greatly simplifying here for brevity. Is that sort of the barrier between the subconscious and the conscious mind, or tell us about that?
It's exactly what it is. It's a filter, it's a screen, it's a semi-permeable membrane, it's an osmotic shield, whatever name you want to put on it. Technically speaking, the reticular activating system is to block out stuff. And the more stressed you are, the more things you're thinking about, the more there is to block out, the tighter the filter closes. The more you relax and feel safe, by moving from beta into the alpha state, where you only think about one thing, the filter opens up because there's not as much to block out. And so when we move out of stress into the alpha state, we create a state called hypersuggestibility. That is, the suggestions we give ourselves have much more power, much more efficacy, because they're going through an unfiltered way into the subconscious instead of the filtered way. It's like when you're stressed, the filter's so tightly closed. For example, if a husband and wife are having a big argument, and they're really stressed, well, at the end of the argument, he'll remember this stuff and she'll remember that stuff, but they won't remember the other stuff because they blocked most of the rest of the stuff out. But when you move out of stress into just feeling safe and paying attention, there's so much less to block out that you let whatever comes in with much more power.
Let me tell you how I've put that into practice from the times I've seen you, and you called it I forget what you called it earlier. I forget. I call it my happy place. My sons tell me, Dad, go to your happy place. We'll be talking about a movie or something, and they'll say, what? My wife Diane will ask, what movie was that? And they'll say, Dad, go to your happy place. I sort of close my eyes and I picture myself. It's funny you're on Maui because it was a wonderful, wonderful resort on Maui. On the beach, drapes open, curtains blowing in, sun, sand, wave sounds.
Yummy.
I go to that happy place and relax the brain, relax that, I guess, reticular activating system, and then bring my focus back. And unbidden, without the stress, 5-10 seconds later, the memory comes out. And yeah, that movie was this movie with these stars, right?
Excellent. Excellent.
It's astounding to me how well it works. How do you find your happy? How do you pick a happy place? Well, let's make this very specific. Somebody's going to go home today and say, I'm going to try that. Let's give them very specific instructions how to do this.
Okay, so the most important concept is that you don't pick it from logic, you pick it from intuition. You let the subconscious mind, whose language is intuitive rather than rational or logical, you let the mind of emotion choose the place rather than the mind of thinking. So you close your eyes and you take a deep breath and you imagine yourself someplace safe. You just say, all right, I'm going to imagine myself someplace safe. You just have that thought and then see what comes up. You don't try and go somewhere. In fact, the thoughts of where you're probably going to go may be right and may be wrong.
But it doesn't need to be a real place or a real memory. It can be entirely made up.
It doesn't have to be. My place is a combination. When I first did this exercise, the first thing that popped up was a meadow, a beautiful green meadow, but that didn't make me feel safe. So my mind knew it needed more, and it added to the memory of the meadow a fantasy, complete fantasy, of this babbling brook running through the meadow that was never really there, and the sound of the bubbling water. And then all of a sudden, out of the woods, these 3 deer came out of the woods and started drinking out of that babbling brook. And as soon as the 3 deer came out of the woods and started drinking of that babbling brook, my whole being went, oh, safe. Because, if there's any danger in the meadow, the deer would have run away.
Sure, yeah.
So for somebody, it might be a memory from their childhood. For other people, it might be a vacation they took, or someplace they've always dreamed of going. For some people, it could be, for a skier, it might be skiing down a mountainside. But for a non-skier, it would never be skiing down a mountain.
A time and a place where you're completely safe and relaxed and calm.
Exactly. And again, instead of trying to figure out what that place is, ask your mind to just allow you to know. It's like inspection or reflection, or even prayer. If you believe in a higher power, ask for the higher power to give you some insight into what that place would ideally be for you. But just let that subconscious mind answer the question of, where is it in the world, the real world, the imaginary world, anywhere? Where is it that I would be safe? Where is it that I'd be happy? Where is it that I'd feel really, really good? And whatever pops up, that's the one. And then you practice going to that one over and over and over and over again. You can go to lots of other places after you've gone to that one, but you always go to that one first.
And you go to that one for how long?
10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. You don't have to go there for very long. It's just, so the subconscious mind, 20 seconds is a long time. I mean, you get a dream that seems like it's hours long in 2 or 3 seconds. So 20 seconds is plenty of time to go there. And after you go there, then you might want to just come back, or you might want to continue from there and go practice your golf game, or imagine yourself having a better relationship with your spouse, or imagining that your job, the problem you have at your job gets solved, or whatever it is you want to do. You're in that state. You can use it to solve problems, make decisions, to practice peak performance, all kinds of things once you're there. But you only just have to go there to let go of stress. Basically, that's the primary purpose of it, is to let go of stress, so that when you do wake up, you've let the stress out of your life and you come back more relaxed and more safe. And stress will build, but it'll build from a lower level than building from up high.
Yeah, I'm a believer, Steve. I've never had, trying to remember something, I've never had this not work.
It's awesome. It really is awesome. And there's so much value in having a highly functional memory. It improves your intelligence and your wisdom and your creativity. It improves your vocabulary. It improves your communication skills. It's just so incredibly valuable. I just am like amazed that so many people just take it for granted and never even think about how important their memory is to them. The more you think about your memory and how wonderful and important it is to you, the more it will function better for you. It wants attention. If you give it attention for doing stuff right, it'll do stuff right. It'll jump through hoops for you, like you experiencing. If you don't pay attention to it, unless it does something wrong, then that's the only way it knows how to get attention. It'll do stuff wrong.
Right. Gotcha. So that the stress and the insecurity that's affecting the reticular activation system, and I guess that's why it's easy to play Jeopardy, relatively easy to play Jeopardy from the couch, and very hard when you get on the show.
Unless you're really good at being in front of an audience, or being in a pressure situation. Like the mind can be trained to do all kinds of things. Firefighters run toward the flames, but that's training. That's just not natural. We have to train to do that. And military and police, they have to be trained to move toward danger. We can move toward danger, and being in front of an audience for some people feels like danger. We can train our minds to deal with that, so it becomes something we love to do rather than we are fearful of.
Okay. So we only have a minute or two left. If someone wanted to learn more from you, is there a resource, a book, a website? Where does someone go if they want to learn more about this?
Well, there is my most recent book. It's called Focused Passion: How to Become Better, Faster, Smarter, and Happier with Far Less Stress and Much More Passion. And that's available on Amazon. It's also available in other ways as well, but that's probably the easiest. And I do have proud to say, I think the nation's largest website of free self-improvement programs, 250 programs on every self-improvement topic I can think of at our website called pen.tools, Tools. No .com or .net, just PEN, which stands for Personal Empowerment Network, pen.tools.
I'll put
And
both these in a link below.
say that again, I'm sorry.
I'll put both of these in a link below so people can
Okay.
see them.
That'd be great. And send me a link as to how I can get my people to know about how to see this. That would be great too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do that.
Awesome.
Final question. Anything else that we covered? I think some really good topics today. I hope some really good topics today, and I appreciate your time. What else do you think is important for people to know? You're such a I've had dinner with Steve. He's such a fountain of knowledge, but this is your last chance to impart wisdom, Steve. Boom, you're on the spot.
I'm going to use two quotes. The first one from one of my heroes, the great John Wooden, probably the greatest coach in athletic history. He said, "Things work out best for the people who make the best out of the way things work out." I just love that philosophy. I think it's really important. You can't control what happens, but you can always control how you respond to what happens. And that's where the power is, in your response, not in the thing that happens. Mm-hmm. And the final thing I'd like to say came from the Moody Blues, and that is, give just a little bit more and take a little bit less from each other.
Nice. Thank you very much, Steve. I greatly appreciate this.
My pleasure. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Thank you very much.
Aloha.